Summa contra Gentiles. Although in the poem, this is in the very starting chapters of the whole work. And well, there's a very interesting opening quote. It says in Latin, "Oportet igitur veritatem esse ultimum finem totius universi, et circa eius considerationem principaliter sapientiam insistere." And so, in the introductory chapters of Summa contra Gentiles, Thomas Aquinas tries to establish a dialogue among reason and faith, so to show that faith is reasonable and that reason needs the guidance of faith. In the first chapters of the first book, Thomas will state that one of the union points of philosophy and theology, this is theology understood as philosophical theology, but also as a present of revealed divine theology, is the knowledge of truth, and that the pursuit of the good. In his very words, in chapter 1st of Summa contra Gentiles, the ultimate good of the universe is the understanding of truth. But the excellence of intellect can also be understood in terms of happiness. So knowing the truth is also being happy. Knowing the ultimate truth is being ultimately happy. Thus, the knowledge of truth is a certain type of happiness. There is a point in which the aim of philosophy, this is the knowledge of the truth and the good, becomes one with that of theology, of philosophical theology. For the knowledge of God is wisdom, and the possession of the ultimate good, firstly known, is happiness. One of the main problems that Aquinas sees in these introductory chapters is this: why is the knowledge of God the ultimate goal of wisdom? One possibility to solve the problem is to try to understand, i.e., make clear, the content of revelation in a philosophical language. So human nature is the starting point of wisdom, and the finality has two aims. As we have said, truth and good. These two aims are nevertheless to be achieved in very different ways. For philosophy and theology have different methods. This is philosophy and revealed theology. And sources as well. One is searched by men. The other is revealed by God to men. Though their aims are the same, knowledge of the ultimate cause of the universe. Finally, we are able to know that philosophy and theology are in dialogue because their final cause is the same, the ultimate fulfillment of human capacities, but their methods are different, as we have said already. In philosophy, the human capacities strive to reach God. In theology, revealed theology, God reaches them. In this brief dissertation, because it's also a topic that I'm still developing deeperly, I wish to show three brief issues in the introductory part, the proemium of Summa contra Gentiles. First, how the truth and the good are the purposes of human life and how Aquinas understands these. Two, how the characteristics of the sage, the wise, that Aquinas mentions mirror those mentioned by Aristotle in Metaphysics Alpha. And three, how the life of the wise ultimately mirrors the life of God in a more precise and supernatural way. And so, for the first issue, as the aims of human wisdom, truth and good, as the purpose of the wise, the introduction or proemium of Summa contra Gentiles is a summary of the nature of wisdom, as well as its place in human existence. In these starting lines, Aquinas follows the path established by Aristotle in the first book of Metaphysics, as we will see later, in which philosophy is presented as wisdom. We want to pursue wisdom, and we want to pursue the ultimate reality. And so when we come to know the ultimate reality, our human capacities are being fulfilled. And so the ultimate end of the universe can be known by us and can be reached by us and can give us the ultimate happiness. Truth in as much as the wise can be, and truth in as much as it can be known and is the pillar of the existing things, and good in as much as good is desirable and is a source of existence of goodness of beings. And so Aquinas mirrors Aristotle in these starting lines he follows the path of Aristotle. And Aristotle, let's remember, gives 5 characteristics of the sage, the wise man. The wise man knows about all things, in as much as it is possible. The wise man knows the difficult things. The wise man has accuracy. He knows the causes, and so considers knowledge for its own sake, not for the sake of anything else, but for its own sake, and has the ability to command. Following the same characteristics of the wise, Aquinas mentions here 3 particular characteristics which are particularly important. These are knowledge of the causes, accuracy, and command. This is text number 2. It says, they are therefore said to be wise with respect on this or that thing, in which sense it is said that as a wise architect I have laid the foundation. The name of the absolutely wise man, however, is reserved for him whose consideration is directed to the end of the universe, which is also the origin of the universe. That is why, according to the philosopher, this is Aristotle, it belongs to the wise man to consider the highest causes. The wise is like an architect, for wisdom is like architecture. It is a science that knows the structure of complex realities and thus has the ability to command. This means that the wise has a knowledge that has no direct practical or technical purpose, but rather is a knowledge for its own sake and is an end in itself. The architectural characteristics of wisdom come from its relationship with the knowledge of the ultimate causes of reality. If these causes are searched as the ultimate end of contemplation, the ability to command appears as a consequence of the view of the totality of the cosmos. The wise can see the totality, the whole panorama, as he is in contact with the very principles that sustain reality as a totality. Thus, as he has the knowledge of the ultimate causes and principles as an end in themselves, he is able to identify the hierarchy of the elements of reality, inasmuch as the relations of the first principles and causes. And Aquinas gives some Aristotelian example of this hierarchical structure, namely medicine, navigation, and the military strategy. It says in text number 3. And so we see among the arts that one functions as the governor and the ruler of another because it controls its end. Thus, the art of medicine rules and orders the art of the chemist, because health, with which medicine is concerned, is the end of all medications prepared by the art of the chemist. A similar situation obtains in the art of ship navigation in relation to shipbuilding, and in the military art with respect to the equestrian art and the equipment of war. The examples of techniques and arts that are subordinated to a ruling knowledge show the way in which a medium comes to an end. The architectural wisdoms can administrate the elements and can command them in an understandable and intelligible order. Of course, we have to know that Aristotle had already proposed these examples about the hierarchy of knowledge in his Politics and Metaphysics when he talks about the architectural sciences. But Aquinas goes on by saying that the aim of the wise is not only to command, but to know the truth in itself as a final state of human perfection. The argument starts with the architectural characteristics of wisdom, but Aquinas then relates the ultimate knowledge of the principles of reality with the supreme felicity or happiness. The purpose of the wise is to know the highest causes of the universe or reality. This knowledge then can identify with happiness. And it says, I have here the translation of what Aquinas says. The name, quote, the name of the absolutely wise man, however, is reserved for him whose consideration is directed to the end of the universe, which is also the origin of the universe. That's why, according to the philosopher, it belongs to the wise man to consider the highest causes. We have already said that. The highest contemplation is in the consideration of the highest causes of reality as a whole, universitatis. But the completeness of the universe can only be seen from outside. This is the problem, from outside the universe, and can only be known by its author. Thus, only God, or the prime mover of the universe, can know the ultimate principles. And Aquinas constructs this problem and gives a solution to this problem, this in the following argument, which is text 4. Now, the end of each thing is that which is intended by the first author or mover, but the first author and mover of the universe is an intellect, as will be later shown. The ultimate end of the universe must, therefore, be the good of an intellect. This good is truth. See the relation between good and truth. Truth must consequently be the ultimate end of the whole universe, and the consideration of the wise man aims principally at truth. We can reconstruct the argument with the following syllogism, well, polysyllogism. The end or purpose of anything is given by its author or mover, and then the author or mover of the universe is an intellect, namely God. The end of the universe must be the end of an intellect, and so if the end of an intellect is truth, then the end of the universe must be truth. The argument is not difficult to follow. Here, it's possible to see that nothing in the universe has sense if it's not because of truth. The problem is that the text suggests that, as we have said, only God as author of the universe would be able to know the truth, and so the human efforts to find it would be futile. It would seem that only God is able to know the truth, and that the communication with the human realm would be only through divine revelation. Nevertheless, after this argument, Aquinas mentions the presence of philosophy as a way to know the ultimate causes of and principles, namely text 5, which says, the philosopher himself establishes that the first philosophy is the science of truth, not of any truth, but of that truth which is the origin of all truth, namely, which belongs to the first principle whereby all things are. The truth belonging to such principle is clearly the source of all truth, for things have the same disposition in truth as being. Aquinas mentions here what Aristotle had said already in Metaphysics Alpha Elaton. In this paragraph, philosophy is presented as science of truth, and the ultimate truth is also the origin of all true things. The principle of being of all things, primum principium essendi omnibus, is also the principle of truth of all things. We can see there is an intimate connection between being and truth, idea that was proposed by Aristotle, as we have said, in Metaphysics Alpha Elaton. And here is the relation between the philosopher's life and the godly, the divine life. We could think that if God is the only one that can know truth from outside the universe, then the wise or the philosopher resembles, this being part 3, resembles God in his task of contemplating the ultimate principles. God contemplates himself as the principle of true origin of the universe, but the wise man, when contemplating, can resemble God in the way of sovereignty. As God contemplates himself, so the philosopher contemplates God as the ultimate principle of being in an ultimate principle of the universe. This follows the Aristotelian idea by which God has a perfect life of pleasant contemplation, namely in Metaphysics Lambda, of his own being. But here Aquinas suggests that the wise may participate of that pleasure of the divine life which is beyond the universe. This is why the knowledge of the ultimate origin of the universe and truth is an end in itself, because of its original sovereignty, because there is no better knowledge available to take its place, and because it is a knowledge of the supreme good, that is also the substantial origin of every other created good. Now, it is possible to see that the consideration of the highest causes that Aquinas mentions can be understood in two ways if we undertake the intimate relation between being and truth. First, the aim of the wise is to have wisdom, and wisdom is the knowledge of truth, and that is the ultimate principle, cause, and origin of all beings. Second, the knowledge of truth turns into happiness, as it is the acquaintance and then pursuit of the ultimate cause and principle that is also the supreme good. The wise contemplates and enjoys the ultimate truth and the supreme good, inasmuch as these are the pillars of reality, but are beyond it, and thus there is no other knowledge or good that can compete with it in sovereignty. And I would like to finish with a quote by Etienne Gilson, saying why Aquinas would think that philosophy is a good friend and a good relation to theology as a revealed theology. Thomas Aquinas has always granted to the Greek philosopher, which is the last text, of course, text 6, to the Greek philosophers that wisdom was the highest possible knowledge. Since he was a theologian, theology was to him the supreme wisdom. But metaphysics itself was a wisdom, especially inasmuch as, intent upon the study of the first principles and causes, it helped theology in its work. Now, as a science through which man finds his way towards beatitude, wisdom must be for him an object of love. Why, indeed, should we seek after wisdom unless we loved it? Rather, how could we possibly acquire something which we do not desire to possess? A true Thomist, then, is a man who knows because he is a man who loves. Because he knows what he loves. There is, in other words, a moral side to the study of Thomas Aquinas. Whichever part of his doctrine we consider, we are always in danger of overlooking half its truth. The peril is nowhere greater than at the point where we stress, and rightly stress, when it's often called his intellectualism. But, well, of course, this is subject of debate. Well, thank you.
Ask one question. If we could take text 4,
Yes.
which then, as it were, continues in text 1, as it were. The interesting thing about this passage is, with a slight modification of the first sentence, perhaps, and this, I suppose my question is going to be, what is, for the purposes of what you're doing, what is assumed and what has to be argued? That's, I'm not quite clear about what you're taking as what you're allowed to have and where you go from that as opposed to what you're trying to establish. So I don't mean that in a kind of deeply sceptical way, I just want to try to get a little bit clearer. So this passage, as it's stated there, has a very pre-Socratic ring to it.
Yeah.
I mean, this could have been written, it actually seems to me this could have been written by 2 people other than Aquinas. One is a late pre-Socratic author, and the other one is Hegel, right? So the point of this is that we just say at the end of each thing is that which is intended by its mover, I'll just say that. But the mover of the universe is an intellect, as will be shown later.
Yeah, quite an Anaxagorean thing.
Sorry? Yeah,
Quite an Anaxagorean thing.
Precisely, yeah.
Yeah.
The ultimate end of the universe must therefore be good of an intellect, this good, this good, and so on. All we need to do to sort of just take it in that direction is just to say that what we have is immanent mind. Right? So the universe just is immanent mind.
Mm-hmm.
Now somebody might say, yes, but hang on a second, we need God to be the cause of that or something. Well, somebody might think that's just regressive. Yeah, what we need is self-motion. We've got self-motions in the universe. Why posit something else behind that? Because ultimately, the theist is going to say, well, we've got a self-moving principle. Mm-hmm. But my pre-Socratic or my Hegelian will say, yeah, it's absolutely true, we've got a self-moving principle. And it's immanent in the universe. Yeah. So I'm just struck with the fact that this passage, it seems to me as it's put, is compatible with the kind of immanent mind picture of the universe. So one question I have therefore is this. Are you taking, I mean, that's not obviously what you want, but how do you get it beyond that? Or do you just assume, as it were, from some other source?
Well, I would assume that Aquinas is taking for granted that God and the world are not the same.
No, I realize that, but what I'm saying is for your purposes, is that something you're entitled to take for granted?
Well, I am trying to just show what Aquinas thinks about wisdom as the ultimate pursuit of human happiness.
Fine.
And knowing the process beyond the cosmos.
Fine.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So for your purposes, that we can just take that.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah, exactly.
Thanks. There's a debate in contemporary epistemology about wisdom that might be really useful to your purposes.
Thanks.
And the debate goes like this: that most people think that wisdom has some connection to goodness. You can't have bad wisdom.
Yeah, exactly.
Kind of thought. Mm-hmm. But then the question arises: is there theoretical wisdom? And so when they go back to Aristotle and they look at the distinction between Sophia and Phronesis, or Sapientia and Prudentia, and they're going to say, well, look at the Sapientia stuff, it's being a really smart metaphysician. And so you look at the final end, and are there any nasty or unpleasant smart metaphysicians? How could that possibly be? So they begin to say, well, so that's an intellectual virtue, and it's not a full virtue, it's not a real virtue. Yeah. And so maybe there needs to be some further connection, and that seemed to be the way that you were pointing at the end of your paper. Yeah. And it seemed to be the second part of Pergolino's paper yesterday. Yeah. And so, in a sense, that kind of territory seems to fit really well with your project, and you might look at it. So,
Yeah, sure.
there's a bibliography, an Oxford bibliography online on wisdom, where we'll pick all that stuff up.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, thank you very much. Yes.
Sorry. Well, I had the notion it's correct, about that our happiness was in our ultimate happiness or ultimate purpose was the possession of God. And I don't know have the reference or something, but it's like an idea that I have that I've been taught. But the Saint Thomas is including that in all the consideration of wisdom, because he includes goodness and true and everything, right? Or it's another kind of yes, the possession of God is included in this happiness that he's referring, or because I think it's more than only or knowledge is another question. Knowledge is also contemplation, or contemplation includes like possession, like love. I'm thinking
Yes.
love. I don't know.
Yes. Well, I would say that Aquinas would be writing this proemium with a protreptic purpose. This is with a preparation purpose as well for the students that would come to see the contemplation of the ultimate causes of the universe. And so, as being also quite protreptic, is being quite Aristotelian, and also very Christian when saying, well, this is an invitation for contemplation, this is an invitation for study, but this is only the introductory part. There are many other issues in which we have to be introduced, in which we have to be taken into, such as the divine life, for example. But since this is the Summa contra Gentiles, and Aquinas is discussing with the Jews and the Muslims and even the pagans, he has to take a more neutral consideration from the beginning. Yes. But yeah, I would say that this contemplation would also be considered as love. But love is not fulfilled until you have the object of your love. But I would say this is rather more a Christian revealed theological question that would include in its solution the sacraments, for example. But firstly, it would be considered as an introductory invitation for happiness, an introductory invitation for contemplation and wisdom, I would say so.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Yes.
Gabriel, I loved your paper. It was
Thank you.
wonderful. And I think the project is beautiful. And I'm going to go back to 4 because I think that it's absolutely true that it looked at in a certain way. This could look Hegelian. It could even look Parmenidean.
Yeah, of course.
But I'm wondering if the work you might want to look at is kinesis, right?
Yeah.
So, right, because, and I think a work that might be helpful for you, just to think through it, is Gisons being in some philosophers.
Yeah.
Right, because the issue of kinesis, of movere, right, is really what's going on, because the author of the universe does not.
It's not good.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
And this is, and that's where the Hegelian would say, well, yeah, of course, he has to move. Kind of like Galileo and his planets, but it moves.
Yeah, like for itself.
But, you know, and then I think you reflect upon is Aristotle Lambda. Just really the case. And I think a book that is very helpful, I think, was for me, to think this through was being in some philosophers. Where there is this issue still. Because or else it would just going to be Parmenides, and the Hegel is Parmenides, and therefore the change has to be illusory. And then we end up being monks. So where do you get the 2? They're going to go through the kinesis.
Yeah. As if the world was moving towards God.
Right.
Yeah.
They're going to go through kinesis.
Yeah, that's a very big discussion on that. Aristotelian scholars would kill themselves in the classrooms when saying, well, what's the way in which God moves
Exactly.
the universe? Is it a formal cause? Is it a final cause?
Yeah, fine.
And so, for example, André Lacks and Enrico Berti had this discussion, and it's very interesting. Yes. But kinesis has to have an ultimate end, right?
Of course.
But the whole point is to establish and to explain how is this?
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And that's why I think kinesis is important. Berti does have some very nice things.
Yeah.
To say that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's still being discussed.
And it should be. It should be because I think when Hegel comes about and there's this shift there, I think he takes some of the tech. He has a definite reading of words like physis and kinesis, and
Yeah,
which are
exactly.
pointing him in specific directions. And I'm just wondering.
Yeah, well, great. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes.
Well, thank you for your position. It was really enlightening. And maybe my question is not so scholarly, but I was thinking about what Professor Marshall was saying yesterday. And if the ultimate end of human existence or of men in general is achieving or knowing God and the ultimate cause, and the first cause, that's the ultimate happiness. I'm thinking about vocations, right? Because of course we all are immersed in an academic atmosphere, right? But I'm thinking about an industrial worker or a sailor or someone that has to do some other things.
Mm-hmm.
Of course they're called to know God, but is it in the same way as a philosopher? Are they capable of achieving the same degree or yes, the same level of happiness as a philosopher?
Well, that's a good question. I wouldn't say that it would be the very same degree, because there are many different vocations and there are many things to be done in the world. It would be rather a dull world if we would all be philosophers, right?
Actually, we wouldn't survive.
Yeah, you wouldn't. So I would say yes, you can find God everywhere. I mean, you can find God in the world. You can find God, like the Franciscans say, to find God everywhere, right? But that would be more a Bonaventurian approach rather than a Thomistic one. But I wouldn't think that God is forbidden to people that do not take contemplation as a professional move. Yeah, I would say so, but it would be interesting to find out how this could be done without contemplation as a professional activity. Maybe you can find God, of course, in your family, in your job, and many other things.
Mostly because to see if there's another kind of wisdom, right?
Yeah.
Besides theoretical wisdom,
But also there's the gift of the Holy Spirit and the vetula who
Yeah.
has
Yeah, exactly.
knowledge and,
Yeah, that's the openness to divine grace.
And I don't know if it's degrees we're worried about here. I think Teresa, little Teresa of the Flowers, has a very nice image in her biography. She was worried about that. And then her sister gave her a wonderful practical proof. They had glasses. She took a little glass, and a big glass, and a big glass, and a big glass. And she filled them all with water all the way up to the brim. And she said, which is the most full? And they were all equally full,
Of course.
but she said, you see, this is how it is for every human being. There's some glasses that are very big, some glasses that are tiny. But the goal of each is to be full.
Of course.
You
Could
do
we
that.
finish there? An important
I was being really nice.
But it's fine, it's fine. Just make an important announcement. The office upstairs will be closed